Medical, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
My sister Reay, and she killed herself. She killed her son. She killed her son, too.
Two people are dead, the mom and the son?
Yes.
On July 26, 2006, police discovered 22-year-old Tori Vienneau dead and strangled with a hair-straightener cord. But there was one more distressing fact that drew the cops' attention. Tori's roommate also found Dean, Tori's 9-month-old baby, who was similarly hanging in the playpen with a cord tied around his neck. But what seemed like a murder suicide concealed a lethal secret. This case took an unexpected turn for the worst as it became entangled in an extremely staged murder scene, a web of suspects, and a complex mystery. At about 8:54 p.m., Tricia called the police in a panic. They arrived at the apartment complex. She told them about the horrible scene inside and then led them to the room on the 3rd floor. When the police entered the flat, they didn't find any signs of breaking in or tampering. As they got closer to Tori's body, they saw something scary, a cord wrapped 4 times around her neck. It was clear right away that Tori wasn't breathing, and what was even more terrifying was that the cord was so deeply buried in her neck that it was clear she had been suffocated. The scene had only just started to show its stark secrets. Detectives saw that Tori had one leg in the open and the other partly covered by her jeans. Her underwear was down to her knees. Her shirt was torn, but her bra was still there. At this point, detectives concluded that Tori had been killed and not hurt herself.
In my experience, if you murder somebody and you know this person and you later have some kind of remorse, frequently they cover that person with a towel or a blanket. It's like a form of burying. I don't want to see what I've done.
One of the officers carefully searched the apartment with his revolver out for any possible suspects or more victims. When he opened the door to a dark room, he saw a terrifying sight that no one had warned him about. A baby lying lifeless in his playpen with a phone cord cruelly wrapped around his neck 4 times. This was Dean, Tori's 9-month-old baby. The horrible finding of a child who had been cruelly strangled took it to a whole new level. Detectives from the San Diego Police Department looked into the crime scene in great detail. They thought it was most likely that the criminal got in through the main door.
There was no signs of forced entry in the house. Now, she lives in the 3rd-story apartment. There's no trees, there's no balcony, there's nowhere someone could climb up and go into the window. That indicates to us there's an acquaintance there, someone she feels comfortable with.
Since the flat was on the 3rd floor and had a very steep drop, no one could have gotten in through a window. They found a bag with diapers and other personal things next to Tori's body. About a foot away, her cell phone and some other things were all over the place. Even though it was a sad scene, there were no signs of a fight. The living room was spotlessly clean, except for a child's stool that had been knocked over. The person who did it seemed to want the scene to tell a story that wasn't true. Eventually, detectives found that Tori's attacker had set up the crime scene to make it look like she had been sexually assaulted. The story of sexual abuse was carefully made to look real, but the truth seemed much scarier. Tori had blood on her head, but not her hands or feet, according to the police. So it looks like she didn't fight back against her attacker because there was no defense wounds on her hands or wrists. Everything pointed to a cold, planned act that made the police question everything they thought they knew about the killer's intentions. The autopsy report showed all the horrible things that Tori and Dean went through and information about how they died. A forensic doctor named Dr. Wagner found a blunt force injury near Tori's left ear during the autopsy. He found 2 places on her brain that were bleeding, which suggests that a hard object caused the cut. The contusion, on the other hand, was probably caused by a body part, like a fist, hand, or knee. Wagner also found that Tori's frontal lobe had been hit hard. There were small pinpoint hemorrhages called petechia on Tori's face, which showed that she was still alive when the rope was around her neck. This was decided because petechia usually happens when small blood vessels under the skin break because of a lot of pressure. The faint marks on her skin told a story of suffering, one that ended with her final breath. Wagner also found no proof that Tori fought back or was aware when she started to bleed, so he concluded that the blows to her head knocked her out. The killer's last fatal move came after she had already been running away. He thought she had been pushed against the couch or had fallen asleep there and been killed there. Wagner said in court that Tori's clothes at first glance made it look like she had been the victim of an attempted sexual attack. The physical test, on the other hand, showed no signs of such an attack. The medical proof showed that Dean's attacker had cruelly wrapped the electrical cord around his neck so tightly that he couldn't even sit down. This happened while he was helpless in the playpen. The tired kid finally sat down, and without realizing it, he tightened the cord around his neck. Sad to say, this made him hang from the cord, which killed him by choking. A child's innocence was shattered, twisted into a nightmare only a deeply disturbed mind could create. Once there was physical proof, it was time to get statements from people who were close to the deaths. When police questioned Tricia, she said that she had come home at 1 p.m. on the day of the killings to find Tori and her son Dean already there. Around 7 p.m., she saw Tori sitting still on the floor with a blanket over part of her. After that, Tricia went back to her room and got gas. When she got back, Tori was still sitting in the same spot. When she looked more closely, she saw something odd. There was a red spot on the couch. The next thing she saw would always be on her mind. It wasn't just a spot. It was a sign of the terrible things that had happened. When Tricia moved the blanket, she saw that Tori's hair-straightening iron cord was tightly wrapped around her neck. She ran to check on Dean right away, but what she saw broke her heart. Dean was also dead. His little body was still in the playpen. His legs and hands were not moving. His face had turned a light blue color, and that was the moment her worst fear came true. Because the scene was so violent, investigators were confused and had a hard time finding any instant leads. It became clear as the investigation went on that this wasn't just a random act of violence. It was linked to a dark and disturbing past that had been hidden for too long and wasn't over yet. Just when police thought they had nothing to go on, they found a link to the victim's ex-boyfriend, Dennis Potts. This was the start of a dramatic turn in the case. Detectives acted quickly, and by 2:45 a.m. on July 27, 2006, San Diego police homicide detectives arrived at the Potts family home to question Potts.
We had learned that she was going to go out on a date with Dennis Potts, and that was her former boyfriend. Dennis Potts was interviewed at the very beginning of the investigation. He was like, oh, yeah, I know who she is. Yeah, we have a history, but I haven't seen her in a long time. And, there was some banter about going out, but there was no date.
Sometime during their final year of high school, Potts and Tori went on a short date. Potts began dating another friend after they broke up. However, Potts and Tori kept seeing each other and became physically involved a few times after graduation, even though Potts had a new lover at the time. By early 2003, however, they began talking to each other less frequently. In 2004, Tori moved in with Neil Springstube, who was her boyfriend at the time, and his roommate, Daniel Moen. Tori and Potts had what he said was their last physical meeting in December 2004. At the beginning of 2005, Tori texted Potts to tell him that she was pregnant with Neil's child. In the fall of that year, she had a boy named Dean. Returning to the events of July 2006, Potts told the officer that the last time he saw Tori was on July 20th, 2006, when they talked about getting together after he got back from Las Vegas. He revealed that he deleted their text messages from the day before to keep his fiancée from seeing them. Potts said they hadn't made any firm, finer plans, but he did say that they talked about hanging out. When pushed, he strongly denied having made any such plans, claiming Tori canceled the idea the night before after changing her mind. His denials only raised further doubts. Back at the Potts family home, before they talked to him, the detectives informally told him that Dean had also been killed. The police believed that leaving out this important information would reveal more about Potts' reaction than any words could. During the interview, Potts told the police that he had been friends with Tori for a long time and that they had been sexually intimate in the past. The police believed what he referred to as a friendship was a tangled web of relationships that may have led to death.
He said that he had spent the time frame that would include the time of the murder between 5 in the afternoon and 8 in the evening at a friend's house, a fellow by the name of Max Korn. He vouched for him.
Potts said he could not have been in the house with Tori since he had been with his friends Max Korn at the time of the killings. Max verified this alibi, therefore clearing Potts from the suspect list. Having confirmed this, the detectives switched their attention to another suspect. Detectives also noted an even more unsettling fact. Potts never once asked about Dean's welfare during the 20-minute interview. The lack of compassion said volumes in the middle of talking about a horrific tragedy. The puzzle altered just when the bits seemed to fit. Their eyes then fixed on Neil Springstube, Tori's more recent ex-boyfriend. Neil revealed an alarming side of his connection with Tori when they were interviewing him. Neil admitted he had been distraught.
Dean was about 5 months, and Neil's family wanted him to have a paternity test. Tori told me the day that Dean was born. I don't know how to fill out the birth certificate. And she told me there was a possibility that Neil was not Dean's father.
And was a bit skeptical about the paternity of her baby Dean after learning Tori had cheated on him with Potts. Neil chose to send a DNA sample to prove he was Dean's father in the spring of 2006. Nothing, though, could equip him for the outcomes that would destroy his life and sow seeds of bitterness and hopelessness. The test findings showed him to not be the father. Recovering from the paternity shock and the betrayal, Neil left Tori and headed for Florida.
I got a call from Tori, and she told me that Neil was going to Florida to get his head together. And I said, "Is he coming back?" And she said, "I don't know."
The distance did not, however, eliminate the suffering, or in the view of the investigators, his capacity for revenge either. Given the romance around the time of her conception, Tori also wanted to find out whether Potts was the father of her child.
We did 2 tests. One where I swabbed myself, swabbed the baby, and one where she swabbed me and the baby. I opened the envelopes fresh in front of her, and I sealed them up in front of her, and then mailed them out. Okay. Came back, not the dad.
Horrible news caused her to lose all hope. She temporarily relocated in with Trisha for a month, sharing an apartment with her sister Autumn and her 2 children during the time of the killings to keep her baby safe. From the perspective of the investigators, Neil had a definite incentive now. This was a father who had recently learned that the son he reared for months was not his blood. He loved very strongly. They thought he might have deceived and betrayed, and he decided to exact revenge by killing Tori and Dean to heal his trauma. But Neil insisted he had been out of state during the murder, thereby denying any participation in the crime. His company confirmed his alibi, therefore attesting to his being at work on the murder day. Every new suspect that the inquiry turned up carried a network of complex disclosures. Neil's absence from the picture sets the scene for a deeper bond between Tori, her son Dean, and another important character, Daniel Moen. The change in living quarters caused Moen to take the front stage in Tori and Dean's life. Tori was at work, and Moen regularly watched Dean. Later, he even looked after him for a week in the spring of 2006, while Tori visited Florida to reunite with Neil. Tori and Moen chose to leave their present apartment upon her return, therefore confirming Moen's place in their lives.
Daniel Moen was probably her best male friend. He was sort of like a babysitter, but more so, almost like a nanny. He always had a crush on Tori. Mr. Moen finally gets to that stage where he has sex with a girl he's pined for months. I think he intended for her to be his girlfriend.
Tensions grew higher and fresh evidence started to show as the inquiry dug further. Police then also discovered security tape showing vital new perspectives on Moen's behavior on the evening of the murders. From 6:43 p.m., footage from a store showed Moen's presence till the store closed. Autumn called Moen later that evening and incorrectly told him Tori had killed Dean and herself. Moen got early permission to close from his store manager after learning this sad news. Then he had phoned his brother, meeting him outside the apartment where Tori and Dean had been tragically discovered dead. On the night of the murders, Jong Young, a homicide investigator from the San Diego Police Department, questioned Moen at the crime scene. Moen told Young that the previous day he had begun work at 2 p.m. Two other staff members who had worked with Moen on the day the murders took place confirmed this knowledge. A few days later, Moen called Young to let him know he had left the business at about 5:20 p.m. for roughly 10 to 15 minutes on the evening of the killings. Detective Young examined the store's CCTV footage in light of this fresh information and found Moen actually inside working at 6:53 p.m. This was the very moment he had gotten the last text message from Tori's phone, in which she indicated she wanted to see him following Potts' cancellation of plans. They calculated that Moen's office and Tori's residence were roughly 10 miles away in each direction, meaning at least 35 minutes for a round-trip travel.
We found that it would have been physically impossible for Danny Moen to have enough time to drive there, commit these acts, and then get back to work in time.
Moen could not have been the killer since he was at work at 6:53 p.m. when he got the last text message from Tori's phone, and Tori's phone was found next to her body in the apartment. The cops couldn't find anyone who did the murder because all the suspects had good reasons not to be involved, but they finally got the order to search Tori's phone, which was a big step forward in the case. Investigators found texts that Tori and Daniel Moen sent to each other on the day of the killings on the phone. The texts talked about a day plan, which made the investigation even more mysterious. At 5:50 p.m. on the night of the killings, Moen texted Tori to say sorry for being rude earlier. Later, Moen said that this text was in answer to a 6-minute phone call they had earlier, during which he told her he didn't like Potts' contact with Dean. Later, Moen got some texts from Tori's phone that made him think something was suspicious or unusual. He got a message at 6:10 p.m. that said Dean is sleeping like a dead dog.
Dean was sleeping like a dead dog.
She said that Dean was sleeping like a dead dog?
Yeah.
Was that the way she talked?
No, not at all.
Then, at 6:27 p.m., Tori texted Dennis Potts to say she couldn't make it and asked Moen to come over after work. Moen asked Tori why she wasn't with him, and she said she didn't want to see him. At 6:53 p.m., Moen got the last text from Tori's phone. It said, "A creepy guy is standing by my car, staring into my place." At 7:05 p.m., Moen texted Tori back. Yikes, when was he going to arrive? He texted again at 7:09 p.m. and asked, "Is the guy still there?" He texted, "You there?" At 7:19 p.m. After an hour, Moen called Tori, but no one picked up. The next message Moen got was from Autumn, telling him about the killings. Moen said that Tori would never say that Dean was sleeping like a dead dog, or that Autumn's flat was my place. He made sure to say that Tori valued Autumn's kindness in letting them stay there for a short time since Autumn was paying the rent. Moen showed the police a strange message that Tori has sent in which she used the word duh. He told her that in all the years they had been texting, Tori had never used that word. This struck him as odd right away.
And then this text is crucial. Tori's phone back to Daniel Moen, 3 letters, duh, D-U-H. All of Tori's friends, Daniel Moen, that's not a word she would use.
These strange facts made it seem like someone else had been using Tori's phone. A big step forward in the case came from the texts that were found on Tori's phone, which was a surprise. Digital forensic experts were able to get back texts that had been deleted, which shed new light on the case. These recently found texts added a shocking new layer to the probe. A very important message from Potts to Tori on July 25, 2006 came to light. It showed Potts' anger and worries. Things didn't change with just one word, though. A criminal investigator for the prosecution said that he looked through Tori's text messages and found 26 messages, some of which had been deleted, that Potts and Tori sent and received on the day of the killings. Tori texted Potts at 4:32 p.m. to see if he was still coming. Potts replied a minute later, "Of course, I'll be there at 5:15. You home or alone?" "Yeah," Tori said. "Dean and I are alone. Is my surprise okay?" Potts replied, "Yes. It's going to be in my car. Autumn's sister. Where is she? I'm not sure," Tori said. "What did you want to say?" Potts replied. "Baby, don't worry. It's not. Wait for me to come over and smile. Then be extra nice to me. I'll call you when I get there." Tori said, "Okay." The phone records show that Potts called Tori at 5:39 p.m. on the night of the killings. As detectives dug deeply into what these texts meant, the case took a new turn, which made them wonder about Potts' true purpose for visiting and his part in the tragedy. The texts were no longer just ways to talk. They were also clues about the people's thoughts and plans that could make or break the case. The questioning of Dennis Potts began now that everyone was looking at him.
You had mentioned to us that you talked to Tori about five or so that
Five or
night?
so-ish, yes.
Okay. You called her or she called you?
I called her. Yeah, definitely called her.
And then what did you guys talk about?
That's really, she wanted to get together on that night. We had talked about it earlier in the week, or last week.
Okay.
I called her and I'm like, what's going on? And she was like, I'm going to text message Daniel and see if he wants to hang out after he gets off of work.
Wait a
That was
minute.
pretty much the extent of it.
Okay, earlier you said she wanted to hang out that night.
We had talked. We had talked about it.
So you guys didn't have any plans per se?
Oh no, nothing set in stone.
Nothing set in
Absolutely
stone.
not. No, absolutely not.
He said he had been out that night and that even though he and Tori were meant to meet, they hadn't made plans. When police asked Potts about the paternity dispute involving Dean, he gave them an unsettling, sure answer.
We did 2 tests. One where I swabbed myself, swabbed the baby, and one where she swabbed me and the baby. I opened the envelopes fresh in front of her, and I sealed them up in front of her, and then mailed them out.
Okay.
Came back, you're not the dad.
The cops then made a request that would completely change what would happen next in this scary case.
Real simple.
Oh, swab, okay.
Yeah.
I was expecting a nurse.
Now, if I compare this to Dean, if I compare what we did here to Dean, what's you going to tell me?
Same thing that our paternity test did. And if not, I'm going to be surprised. Really, sincerely surprised, yes.
It was shocking to find out that Dennis Potts was Dean's real father. His old DNA report was fake, so he could keep the truth from his new girlfriend. Potts had a clear reason. He didn't want his new relationship to be hurt by his relationship with Tori in the past. Following this, the police looked at Potts' phone. They found that Potts' phone calls went through cell tower 814 from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the day of the killings, except for a call at 6:44 p.m., which went through cell tower 425. The murder scene was about 0.6 miles away from this cell tower. A senior expert said it was almost impossible for Potts to have gotten that call at home because it would have gone through cell towers 814 or 357 instead. They also found text messages that Potts and Tori had deleted from the day of the death.
One of the first messages on her phone was at 6:27 p.m. But interestingly, all the messages before that were erased, and the question sort of became why. And what we came to learn is that Dennis had deleted a lot of the messages because they dealt with the meeting, the fact that they were planning to go out and what she was going to wear and when they were going to meet and the babysitter. So all of those were deleted.
These texts proved that Tori and Potts had planned to meet and had chosen a specific time. It became clear that Potts had lied in the texts that were sent after this meeting time. People who searched Potts' house found a disturbing Google history. In the weeks before Tori's death, People had looked up things like how to cheat a swab paternity test, the best way to kill someone, getting out of child support, and performing a chokehold.
And, for us, obviously, the fact that on July 19th, he was Googling how to kill someone and performing chokehold, both of our deceased in this case were strangled. This told us a lot about Dennis Potts' mind.
The investigation, which was now clearly aimed at Potts, found a complicated web of lies, motives, and chances. Potts was Tori's on-again, off-again boyfriend and the father of her child, but he lied about it by giving her a fake paternity test. He was eager to forget his past now that he had a fiancée and a new life. He made a scary choice that would leave no open ends because he was afraid that the paternity test would show who he was. He looked online for ideas on how to kill someone and set up the perfect crime scene. On that terrible day, he walked into Tori's house with a bad plan and pretended it was a date. Since Tori and their child were the only ones there, Potts showed his worst side. He killed Tori and Dean by strangling them, making them unable to speak again. Then, he texted from her phone in a cold planned move to try to frame Moen and put the blame on someone else. But Potts' horrible crime was found out no matter how hard he tried to hide it. When his mask of a loving boyfriend came off, the horrible killer inside was revealed. A horrible act of violence sadly cut Tori Vienneau and Dean's lives short. At last, though, justice was done when Dennis Potts, their killer, was brought to light. Potts and his friend Max Korn, who lied about his alibi, were arrested and charged with Tori and Dean's murders on January 16, 2008. Potts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
The judge gave him what they call double life without parole. So in other words, he has to do 2 life terms. There's no chance for parole whatsoever, so he'll obviously die in prison.
For his part in impending justice, Korn got a 3-year jail sentence. Still, the narrative continued much beyond the sentence. The judge made a strong gesture, granting Tori's mother, Haylee Vienneau, a request that would always remind Potts of his atrocities. For the rest of Potts' life, a horrific picture of Tori and Dean united in their casket was hung on his prison cell wall. Given the violence Potts had perpetrated, this terrible reminder was appropriate. Left grieved by the death of her daughter and grandchild, Haylee Vienneau turned into a committed advocate for crime victims. Before we close the video, we want to extend our heartfelt condolences to the Vienneau family and everyone who loved Tori and little Dean. It is quite terrible to lose a young mother and her innocent child. We can only hope that, with time, the memories of the love they experienced will bring some healing. Thank you for watching. We hope this video sparked some interesting thoughts while also being educational. Kindly leave a comment below indicating which case you would like us to cover next. And don't forget to subscribe and click the like button for more real crime tales.